completely indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Well, hello there, and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde, and my job here is to call out some of the more egregious examples of media bias here in the great state of Idaho. I feel like today I need to clarify before I go any further that at the very foundation of this program, and actually the foundation of my efforts, as well as the Idaho Freedom Foundation, it's all about promoting the principles and practices of freedom. And I'll grant you, not everybody sees freedom the same way. Not everybody would define it exactly the same way. But sometimes I just have to wonder, you know, how much of what, for instance, the Idaho Statesman would define as freedom is actually freedom and not just some kind of weird, perverted equivocation that is used to justify whatever they want. Because the theme, as you're going to see today, is that freedom is more than just sex. But that's a hard thing to sell to people who are very wrapped up in the left-wing agenda, which right now is sexualizing as much of our society as possible, including and especially alarming, extending to the sexualization of our children. So let's start with a recap of the elections held earlier this week. I think I mentioned this on Wednesday. From a taxpayer standpoint, the big levies, the $500 million levy in West Ada, it failed. So in that sense, smaller government prevailed, or at least less fleecing of the taxpayers prevailed. In other areas, there were levies or there were bond issues that did pass. But we lost the libraries for the most part in the process. That's the assessment I heard from both conservative as well as progressive commentators. And we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into that. But I want to share with you this is the headline from an editorial from the Idaho Statesman. Idaho library election results are in. For the most part, freedom prevailed. Now, if you're like me, you'll be a little bit curious about, well, what exactly do you mean by freedom? Less government, less taxation, more personal responsibility, less, someone breathing down my neck at every moment trying to regulate every aspect of my life? Oh, no. No, that's not at all what they meant. The Statesman says Tuesday was a good day for freedom in Idaho. I don't know why they don't use the scare quotes on the word freedom, but they really should. In almost all cases, the forces of censorship, that would be far-right candidates who've attempted to take over local library boards, took a thumping. Candidates who pledged that public libraries would remain places of free intellectual inquiry triumphed. Okay, Pravda would look at this and go, really? You guys aren't laying it on just a little bit thick? Why, the glorious supporters of our agenda have prevailed and our enemies have been vanquished. Huzzah! Yes, it's an editorial. I guess they can pop as many corks as they want to. But that line about libraries remaining places of free intellectual inquiry triumphed. Really, is that what people who are expressing concern about perverted, deviant ideas and pictures and ideals being taught to their kids, somehow that's stifling free intellectual inquiry? That sounds like something a groomer would say. And I don't say that ironically. That's exactly what a groomer would say. The Statesman says perhaps the most hotly contested races were in Meridian, where there have been efforts to simply disband the district because the library has what they call sex education books and books that make reference to the lives of gay people. Is that all? Because nobody would know otherwise that gay people existed. It's not like we have months of pride and months of celebrations and drag shows, and every character on television and every Netflix series has been written to portray a very strong LGBTQ agenda. No, these books in the library, why, that's the only way people would ever know that gay people even exist. Please, spare us your sophisticated tutelage, Statesman. Incumbent Destiny Hart, who has pledged to protect free expression, beat challenger Xavier Torres, who had signed the petition to disband the district by more than a 2-to-1 margin. Now, keep in mind, voter turnout for these elections was very, very low. So this is one of those. Sadly, it's one of those throwaway elections where a lot of people really didn't feel that they had a dog in the fight, and so they stayed home. So if you want to pretend like, well, this is a huge mandate on the part of the people of Idaho, no, it just means one side was better at getting out the vote than the other. The results were essentially identical in the race between incumbent Josh Cummings and challenger David J. Tiziker. Now, they go on to say, by the way, I have to share this. the idea that, well, these books they just reference the lives of gay people. Oh, look, here's this person in the LGBTQ colors treading an LGBTQ colored land with LGBTQ colored schools and clouds and a city, and they're sticking their neck into a church to tell the person, stop oppressing me. I thought it was a pretty funny depiction and more accurate than I think most of us really would like to admit. Back to the editorial. And the trend of anti-censorship voting held up not just in the Treasure Valley, but across much of the state. From North Idaho to Eastern Idaho, library trustees committed to what the statesman calls freedom generally prevailed. Now, here's where they get a little bit nasty, though. Okay, they get a lot nasty. Though one exception was in Kootenai County, where pro-censorship challengers Tom Handley and Tim Plass defeated incumbents Regina McRae and Judy Meyer. I don't know if you have seen in the Idaho Tribune some of the video stills or the actual video footage of the meeting where these two sets of candidates debated. But the challengers who won brought with them very convincing evidence that showed conclusively these books that are in question, the materials that are being furnished to kids, are extremely inappropriate. This was despite all the protestations on the part of the incumbents. Well, no, they're not. No, they're not. No, nothing doesn't exist. And you can even see the looks on these women's faces. They are just uncomfortable. Why did we have to, open our mouths and pretend like this doesn't exist when it's being shown to everybody, and now we're being seen as liars? So I have to, give credit to the voters up in Kootenai County. You saved your library system, or at least you put people in there who take seriously the idea of gatekeeping. Why the left and the progressives want to call it censorship, I can assume is just their willingness and desire to engage in hyperbole. But you only think you've seen hyperbole. Wait till you hear this. Handley built his campaign on a lie. He pledged to protect children from the hardcore pornography that is available to children in our library, as the Coeur d'Alene Press reported. The assertions that libraries are full of porn and inappropriate material are ludicrous. But you can expect Handley to call books he doesn't like pornography for the purposes of censoring them. I'd like to see a direct quote actually from him, saying that this is the case and that's all that this is. He may have likened the books to hardcore pornography. The images very much are hardcore in the sense that they are depicting full-on sexual acts. And again, the thing that seems to be glossed over here is these are aimed at children. These are written for children. They are promoted to children. In what world does that equal, well, it's fine, it's just, they'd see the same thing if they picked up a copy of, National Geographic or Playboy or something. No, they wouldn't. And that's why it's being called out as material that is not appropriate to be made available to these kids in the library. Now, that doesn't mean that, therefore, we must burn every aspect of it that we can find. You want to find it? You want to go sort it out and find it, and enjoy it with your pervy friends? Great. Do so. But don't pretend that a library, which is a place of learning and a place of, mental and intellectual growth, is appropriate to put that in front of kids who are still very much in their formative years. All right, back to the editorial. Kootenai County, home to perhaps the most extreme faction of the Idaho Republican Party, which has increasingly been willing to link arms with characters like David Riley. Oh, you can just hear the derision dripping from the way they write this. Is increasingly a pocket where censorship and indoctrination are advancing as freedom recedes. Orwell himself would be rolling his eyes so hard he could see his brain to read that. Well, freedom is receding. Freedom to do what? What progressives are telling us? To shut up and do as we're told? Or is there a different definition? I'd love for the statesman to define your terms. You keep referring to this as freedom. What exactly do you mean? Freedom is receding. If you're talking about the freedom to prey on children, I certainly hope it's receding. It has no place being in those libraries in the first place. But, you want to call it censorship. Again, I would say it's more like gatekeeping. Now they go into full smear mode on David Riley. Riley resigned from his job as a radio host in Pennsylvania after his supportive tweets and footage of the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia became public. Now they go on to accuse, they say, he not only was supportive of this, but 4 days before the rally, a user later identified in court testimony as Riley suggested the idea that participants marched straight through the commons with torches for the night rally for the purpose of producing propaganda footage. The footage Riley posted after the rally with advertisements for another rally the following day was exactly the kind of propaganda footage discussed in the post. Now, remember, there's been a lot of effort on the part of the left, to tar President Trump as well. He said there were very fine people there that day. And he did say that there were fine people from both sides, meaning there were good people who were there to honestly represent their point of view. There were also some very unsavory people from both sides. Yes, the anti-fascist side as well as the white supremacist side. They don't understand it yet, but those two sides are really peas in a fascist pod. Nonetheless, now David Riley's being accused of, he's marching in lockstep with them, and why he was actually suggesting it was their idea. It was his idea to walk through this with the torches and so forth. Oh, look, what's this at the very end of the article? Oh my! The next day, this editorial has been updated to remove an out-of-context quote attributed to David Riley and to remove an inaccurate statement about Riley's involvement in the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. Now, they may have covered their bases, but look, this is what passes for professional journalism or professional journalistic standards in our day? Hardly. So what exactly was the out-of-context quote? What exactly was the inaccurate statement? Well, we've removed them, but, in the court of public opinion, the damage is already done, so not out of character for the Idaho hatesman, but still disappointing nonetheless. Now, as far as the idea that, these things really aren't happening and nobody really sees these kind of things, I'm just showing you a couple of images. There are many more. These are the ones that I could find that I felt like I can show these without feeling like I need to give you some kind of a disclaimer of, look, you're going to see some pretty graphic stuff here. But nothing to see here, just children masturbating, touching themselves and being taught, above all, this is totally normal. I think that's actually what this is from, is the book, This is Normal. Well, this is totally good. Go have fun, kids. Your body's a playground. More, again, sexual content. And again, the people who portray this as, well, this is just intellectual inquiry. This is just where kids are learning about, some of the things they have to learn about sex. No, it's not. This is indoctrination into a mindset and more appropriately into a perverted mindset that seeks to plant questions in kids' minds when they're at an age where they aren't even close to beginning to bear the emotional weight that comes along with being sexually mature. Frankly, there are a lot of adults who struggle with that too. But here we have folks who just want to point this at kids and, turn them loose. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with this. It ain't National Geographic. That's for sure. Now, thankfully, there are people like Anna Miller with the Idaho Freedom Foundation who have done the hard work of digging out the deception and bringing it into the light when the school districts and others say, well, this is not available to young children. Oh, yes, it is. And Anna has actually written a very timely and in-depth article on particularly Blaine County School District libraries offering pornographic books to children as young as elementary school. Now, again, I chose not to share many of the images, and some of them are very graphic. Some of the dialogue is very graphic. I don't want to. If you want to see it for yourself, you can see it, and it's Anna pulls no punches. She gives you some exact excerpts that will help you understand the kind of material that's being aimed at these kids. But again, it's about the fact that it's being aimed at children that should have us concerned. In her article, she points out Blaine County School District libraries offer many pornographic and pro-gender transition books to children as young as elementary school. The IFF Center for American Education obtained public records from the Blaine County School District's library database, known as Destiny Discover, which revealed that the school libraries across the district offer disturbing and sexually explicit material to kids. Anna goes on to say the problem begins in BCSD's elementary school. The Bellevue Elementary School Library offers the pornographic book, It's Perfectly Normal, a book about changing bodies, growing up, sex, and sexual health by Robbie H. Harris to kids. The book includes instructions on how to masturbate, perform anal sex, and get an abortion. The book has graphic depictions of both male and female children masturbating. It shows entirely nude illustrations of two men having sex and naked children in a variety of situations, including looking at themselves in the mirror. The book includes a section on birth control and abortion. It teaches children about sexual orientation. Now, the book is not an official part of the official curriculum at Bellevue Elementary School, but could be in and out of the classroom as teachers have immediate access to it, and it is provided in the library for children to read. Children as young as 11 in middle schools are also subjected to alarming material. Wood River Middle School offers many books about sexuality and transgenderism to students, including This Is Our Rainbow, 16 stories of her, him, them, and us, Felix Ever After, Beyond Magenta, Transgender Teens Speak Out, and Growing Up Trans in Our Own Words, written by Susan Cucklan. The book Beyond Magenta includes disturbing passages such as the depiction of a child as sexually mature who hated being a kid. Again, there are excerpts that are provided within this article, and if you have the stomach for it and you want to just see, well, how graphic could it possibly be? It's very graphic. If you have kids, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that's inappropriate. Unless, of course, you're some kind of a monster who's intent on, changing your kid's gender, in which case I would urge both you and your child, get the help you need before you make decisions that can't be undone. Anyway, back to Anna's article. Earlier this year, Governor Brad Little vetoed legislation that could have stopped school employees from making harmful material like these books available to minors. Known as the Children's School and Library Protection Act, the legislation would have allowed minors who obtained harmful materials in violation of the law or their parents or legal guardians to bring a civil lawsuit if school or library personnel distributed the materials or if the school or library failed to take reasonable steps to restrict access to material harmful to minors. In defining content that's harmful to minors, it included depictions of masturbation, sexual excitement, sexual conduct more generally, and nudity, among other things. Now, the public should be deeply concerned about why any school librarian would think this graphic content was appropriate for school-age children. The recent victory in Kootenai County of electing conservative trustees in the local library district suggests taxpayers and families are finally waking up to the corruption of both local and school libraries. And Anna Miller says citizens who care should follow Kootenai County's lead to take back library districts and also school boards. Now, someone would say, well, that's a call for violence. No, that's a call for common sense. That's a call for let's be gatekeepers and make sure that we're not allowing these things to find a toehold, or for that matter, a stronghold in the libraries that we want our kids to attend. And it brings us to a very interesting place, which is, why is it that libraries have become such a cultural battlefield? There was a time where, parents could feel free. If you wanted the kids out of the house on a summer day, go drop them off at the library, let them explore for a couple of hours. And, no matter what they chose to explore, you at least had pretty high confidence it wasn't going to be something inappropriate or something that would have you sitting in a therapist's office or, heaven forbid, in a doctor's office, debating, well, do we cut off their sex organs now or just start the hormone treatments or whatever? But that's the kind of stuff that is being made available today. I don't know the larger reasons behind this agenda, but it's happening. And to pretend that it's not happening or this is just a figment of some right-winger extremist's imagination, totally untrue. It is taking place, and I don't know why library associations have chosen to throw in with the woke and pretend that, well, it's a matter of censorship if we don't make this available to kids. It's not a matter of banning these materials. It's not a matter of banning books. It's a matter of putting gates around those things that are not appropriate age-wise for children and keeping them out of reach, at least in those venues, public and school libraries, until they're old enough to make those kind of decisions for themselves. Plain and simple. And that's a primary responsibility of parents. So parents, maybe the time has come. You pull your kids out of school. Maybe the time has come that you stop patronizing your local library. I'm not going to tell you that I've got the perfect solution, because I don't. They're your kids. You know them better than anybody. But the thing you do need to understand is that the library has become a cultural battlefield. Wonderful Substack piece here from Brian Allman. We didn't start this fight, but we can't run from it. A couple of observations he makes that I think are well worth your consideration. He asks, why are libraries a battlefield in the culture war? In fact, for that matter, why did moderate Republicans like Julie Yamamoto, Larry McCann, and Greg Lanting join forces with far-left Democrats like Ileana Rubel and Colin Nash to oppose a bill that simply said that libraries and schools must be held to the same standard as convenience stores with regards to allowing children access to obscene materials? Why did Governor Little veto that bill? Why did a group of concerned parents file a petition to disband the Meridian Library District, and why was opposition so fierce? Brian says, in the middle are normal people who would never support giving pornography to children, but they're swayed by arguments based on tolerance, compassion, and diversity. They escape the cognitive dissonance of their position by pretending there's nothing objectionable in our libraries, and that anyone saying otherwise is a rabble-rouser, probably a California transplant who's exaggerating a non-issue for political power. Brian says, we saw this cognitive dissonance on display when Julie Yamamoto, chairman of the House Education Committee, argued on the floor that H 314 was a bad bill because children really don't have access to obscene materials. And then Chairman Yamamoto turning around and disallowing citizens from reading materials in her committee because there were underage pages in the room. She tried to argue the bill was about criminalizing the Chronicles of Narnia rather than keeping kids from genderqueer. Isn't that something, by the way? I have to just harp on this for a moment. Well, you know, those words that you want to share in this committee hearing are so offensive, there is no way that I will allow you to subject other people, including these underage pages, to the impact of those words. But at the same time, if your kid wants to check it out of the school library, yeah, that's good. It's cool. It's inclusive. Rainbows for everybody. Anyway, back to Brian's Substack. He says, I see two major factions on the field. On the left, you have those who very much want children to be exposed to graphic materials. They are fully committed to queer theory, which says that what we call childhood innocence is really cis-heteronormative oppression, and that children need exposure to graphic LGBTQ plus materials to awaken their latent queerness. That sounds about right. He says, every night our media tells viewers that conservative values are bad, while progressivism is an unabashed good. They tell you that anyone concerned about graphic materials in the library is a bigot, a white supremacist, a radical, and that all right-thinking people should disavow such things. They even mislead people. News coverage of the petition to dissolve the Meridian Library District implied that the result would have been closing the libraries themselves rather than simply replacing the Board of Trustees. Why do they lie? Why can't they be honest? And I think the answer probably comes down to some version of, because these are people who are trying to defend the indefensible. They're trying to defend the stealing of innocence from young people and from trying to warp their minds with what's currently a trendy ideology that nonetheless turns out to be very destructive. You know, over and over again we hear, well, you know, the suicide rate among gay and lesbian and trans kids is phenomenally high compared to other kids. And yet, you know, when you consider, there's never been a time, at least in our society, when these things have been more accepted, in fact, promoted at every level. Academia does it, entertainment does it, media does it, business does it. Many churches have knuckled under and are doing it right now. Virtually all of these institutions now, with the exception of a few, have been captured by the LGBTQ agenda. And yet we're told that the more we embrace this, the more that these kids are shown, you know, through pride festivals and celebrations and rainbow flag safe spaces everywhere they go. Still, the suicide rates are unacceptably high. When is someone going to ask the question, could it possibly be because this is a very unhealthy, unsuccessful type of lifestyle? And again, we're evaluating the behavior here. I think every person has intrinsic value. I think every person's a child of God. But it's the behavior that needs to be evaluated, and I believe rejected because it is not on a par with can I just say it, normal behavior. The kind of normal behavior that brings a man and a woman together for life and causes them to commit to one another and stay in a relationship and raise the children that they sire, which, by the way, is the only way that children come into this world. It takes a female and a male component, notwithstanding whatever trendy, you know, permutations that are being promoted right now. If we allow this kind of ideology to take over what once was a safe space for our kids to go and explore the limits of their imagination and to push against the mental boundaries of their understanding of the world, I mean, what's left? What's next? It seems to me that we don't have very many places left where you can safely protect the innocence of the young. I have to throw this in there just because I was watching Home Alone not too long ago and remembering, oh yes, this is what gender study was like when I was a kid. And sadly, there are a lot of kids who found Big Brothers or Dad's Playboy, and that was their introduction to, you know, gender studies. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, by the way. Pornography addiction, that's a very real problem as well. Much more of a problem now that it's available pretty much for free, anytime, anywhere, thanks to the internet. If our job as adults is to be responsible for and to raise productive, healthy children, raise them to adulthood, make them productive citizens, and help them find their place in this world, doesn't that also infer that at some level we're supposed to be providing protection against various elements that may be seeking to do them harm or to lead them into dangerous pathways? Because I'm going to suggest that this is exactly what's happening. And when you see it finding a place within schools, not just in the libraries, but within schools themselves, when you see your public library becoming, a hotbed of LGBTQ activism, that's a problem, especially when that activism is being directed toward children in the hope of shifting their minds as early as possible before they're old enough to really understand how they're being manipulated. Now, I get it. There are those who, well, Brian, aren't their parents manipulating them, taking them to church, raising them to know right from wrong? Yes, they are. It's their responsibility too. So, don't try to paint that as, well, that's a terrible thing. That's part of the natural order. Parents raise their children. Parents who believe are doing it not because, well, I'm going to impose this ruthless orthodox type of thinking on my kid. They do it because they believe, the parents believe, they have a personal accountability with their creator, and that they will be held responsible for the way that they raise their kids and whether or not they taught their kids to seek light rather than darkness. Look, I wish it weren't so. I wish it weren't the case that there are people out there who really feel like it's their prerogative to change our children's minds or to try to step past us as parents and inflict things upon our kids that they aren't possibly ready to consider. They call it censorship. That's because they know it's a loaded word and it carries a lot of emotional baggage. It's really gatekeeping. And there's a time that we just have to stop being apologetic about it. We don't have to play nice and say, well, I'm sorry that offends you. We need to assert who is really in authority here. If you are the parent, you are the authority. You have more authority than a politician. You have more authority than a doctor. You have more authority than a teacher or a principal. And you certainly have more authority than some misguided activist who, for whatever reason, has set their eyes on your child. So start acting like it. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm crying.
Nobody wants to see.
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.